You wouldn't expect references to the big lie to be a big part of kids' education, but it's starting to crop up. And what do you know, in Florida, Bradenton, Florida specifically, take a look at what these kids were exposed to. So there's a take-home sheet headed, "How does a historian work?" which I think is an interesting topic, meant to prepare students for a test. One mother proceeded to quiz her child on its list of vocabulary words. The first 6 were understandably evidence source, primary source, secondary source, reliable source, and point of view, things that kids need to understand. Then there was number 7, and let's take a look at what it actually looked like. So they have these 2 claims under the heading of bias. President Trump made claims that the 2020 election was stolen, and President Trump made false claims that the 2020 election was stolen. The mother says it's actually the most biased example of bias I've seen. It seems pretty out of place for a 6th grade class because they declare the first sentence is just giving you information, while the second sentence leads you to believe that he's wrong before you have all of the facts. Now look, I do think it's important for kids to understand bias and how it functions, and the many ways that it functions the media doesn't focus on. The pro-corporate bias of many of these media outlets I think would be a great thing to include in these lessons. But the idea that stating that the claims are false 2 years after they were made with all of the evidence that we have seems to be going a bit far for me. It would be biased to say he made kooky claims or he made crazeballs claims. That's an opinion. The fact that the claims were false is itself a fact, and acknowledging a fact is not a bias. I would say that refusing to take a position on what is demonstrably clear, that could demonstrate bias as well, but it's not a sort of bias that they're interested in delving into in this lesson. But anyway, that's my view. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it all just stems to a lot of people who push an extreme right agenda while they claim to be above politics. They claim to be in the center. And once again, that's an incredibly dangerous place to be in, because then no matter what somebody says, no matter how ridiculous it is, you're willing to just gloss it over and say, well, if you call out a lie for a lie, that means that's just as bad as lying because you're being biased too. And it really just puts you in this position where you think you're above everybody else, right? And you think that you're smarter than everybody else, that you're the magically unbiased person, when the truth is you're more biased than anybody else because you are gonna do more cover for the most extreme right than you are gonna do really anything in terms of giving anybody any useful information.
100%, yeah, and we can't miss the fact that this is Florida, that Ron DeSantis is, like he's exercising an iron fist over education standards and that sort of thing. But yeah, the idea that you should understand bias, I think kids should have a much better understanding. But they should also understand the bias that comes from choosing not to take a position on something. A bias in choosing what to cover and what not to cover. It goes way beyond simply applying an adjective to a noun. But that's not what they're interested in teaching the kids.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.